But here's the thing with Roczen. He's had a history of having issues in the heat ever since his injury. He has not been champion since his injury, the big arm injury, and then the other hand injury. I don't know. If this were already hot and he were there, I'm sold on him. Now we're heading into Redbud and that stretch where there's a bunch in a row. That's where we're going to find out if Roczen's going to be there. I didn't like what I saw in that second moto. It's funny. The guys almost know when they get to, so if Roczen comes up on you, they know he's got speed. Roczen's got speed on everyone in that field, except for maybe Tomac when he goes bananas.
Yeah.
And he might even have him covered there. But he when they get there, like they know if they can fight him off for 2 laps, he almost settles. I don't want to say he's broke because he's not broke, and he did come back at Dylan later on, but you can see how he just settles. And it's just weird how, I don't know. And the other guys you can almost feel that on the track. They go, okay, if I can just keep him behind me, he'll stop. Where you get a guy like Ferrandis, Osborne, Tomac, there's no stop. Like you're almost better to just let him go and try and hook onto him. Yeah. But with Roczen, they know not to do that. Is that what you saw too?
Well, I made this declaration in our show when you and I were talking about how the season's going to come out, and I've stated it then, and I'll reiterate it again now. It's going to be whether or not he has the ability to withstand the heat. I know that sounds like a duh statement, but in my biased opinion, all it's going to take is one bad race and we lose Roczen, because Roczen he's all of these racers. Confidence is a big thing. What I saw in Roczen was, all right, I still have 9 more rounds to go. So if I come out here and I smoke myself, the only saving grace that Roczen's had up to this point is we had a 2-week break. We have yet another break, which gives him a chance to fully recharge his batteries after a pretty, I'm not gonna say it was a hot weekend, but it wasn't like it's been up to this point. We saw a little bit of his little kink in his armor. We didn't see that RCH Roczen that we saw in the first couple rounds. Like you said, it's kind of like it's merging together. Saw some hotter conditions. We're now at round 3 going into 4. I made the prediction there. If he has one bad race and loses momentum, and then that gets covered, no pun intended, you throw another layer of difficulty with heat and humidity. I don't see Roczen going the distance just based on what we've seen historically. And I think the way that we saw him conservatively ride that second moto. Now, again, you got to be in it to win it. We know that. We know that, as the old saying goes, if that's, I think Jet Reynolds said it, or maybe it was even AC, if this is as bad as my bad day is, I'll take it. That's what a champion does, manage the series. But I do have to agree with you 100%. I think we may have seen kind of a little bit of a shift with Roczen. Would any of us, listeners included, be surprised if Roczen comes out and wins the next 8 rounds? No, not at all. I'd be surprised if he does it in the heat, but if it's based on capability, we all know, as we saw early on in the series, speed's there. It's his, what would we call it? Sensitivity to heat, sensitivity to fatigue, sensitivity to all of that. The one thing that I do miss is I miss Ken Roczen that came over from Germany, and he had a lot more bravado. I know he's older, he's got a family now, and that, matures all of us, but I just miss that Kenny and I don't want the listeners to think I'm being insensitive. We know he's been through hell and back with his arm injuries and his illness and all that. I'm not. I just miss the Kenny that I feel like when Kenny is giving an interview, he's very cautious. I just don't like his personality compared to him when he first came over, where he was like, I just want to race my dirt bike. I want to go fast. I want to be a champion. And I miss that.
He's more polished,
but I think he's a little softer.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And I don't want the listeners to think I'm being derogatory of him. I think he's a great guy. I just miss that. I guess maybe that's the buzzword of our show today, is I miss that pit bull that we saw when he first came over. The pit bull that we're seeing in Jet and Hunter is what I miss in Roczen. But I do think it's interesting. Roczen has brought back that European, let's stand up longer and longer in the corners. We talked about this off the air together. I think it's interesting how riding styles have now changed yet again, because Kenny's doing it better, not doing it better. It's all in the eye of the beholder, but he's bringing back the idea, why sit down so much? So he's standing up more and more. And now you're starting to see it infiltrate. Hell, you're even seeing it infiltrate into the amateurs now. All the riding coaches are like, you don't need to sit down, stand up more, watch Roczen. But we saw Purcell do it, and we saw G. Michelle Bell do it, and those guys.
So you're saying sit on the back seat of the 450 wasn't the actual technique that we should be using because it worked for 1 year. I'm just saying.
Just saying.
I'm referring to Zach Osborne sit on the back. And while that works for Osborne, not everybody is Osborne. Osborne's tough, gnarly, his cardio's through the roof. The average guy tries that, he's going to wind up on his head. And that's exactly. more often than not, that's what happens to Osborne too. So
yeah, well, but it's just, I love the fact that Roczen he's his own unique character. It's interesting how he's not afraid to try different things. And that's all I'm trying to say with Roczen. I think it'll be a difficult summer for him. At the end of this, we could be looking back at the show and go, Rob, you're an idiot. But just based on what I've seen historically, hot, humid conditions, I saw a little bit of I'm not going to use the word weak, but I saw a little bit of a glitch in the armor in that second moto. And hopefully he can turn it around. I mean, again, we have a week off. And correct me, Chris, when we resume at Redbud, it's 3 consecutive back-to-back weekends?
I'd have to double check, but either Redbud or the one after Redbud, we go on a stretch where there's 3 in a row.
That's where obviously, and the listeners would go, duh, Rob. But that's where I think we'll see it's either he's still in it or he's back into that 10th, 11th place. And then I'll just make a prediction. I have absolutely no grounds for it. If he's back in 10th, he doesn't finish the series, which is what I predicted at the beginning of the season. I don't think he'll finish outdoors.
Yeah. Now, if we're at Washougal and he's still in this thing, these guys are in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
That's right after that. That's kind of when we start to get back. It starts to cool off again. We come back to the West and this year's going to be different. We're going to finish up at Paula and Hangtown. So if he can stay within a moto within then, it's going to be a different story. And speaking of, these past champions, Tomac. I love this guy, Rob. I love this guy. This guy is awesome. And it was funny because, our boy Hopper and everybody jumping on, like, is he done? People are talking about if Yamaha's ripping up the contract. I'm like, no, guys, like, just look at history. I've been covering this guy for a while and I've been critiquing him. I wrote an article how I thought he suffered from the yips, the baseball yips where you throw the ball. I thought it was the yips. I don't even know what it is anymore. I don't know if it's mental, physical. I don't know, but I love it. The one thing about Tomac, he's unlike any rider I've ever seen in my life. He loses his speed. James Stewart would make mistakes and go crash, and Ricky, same thing. Nobody ever forgot how to ride like Tomac does, and then comes back. And it was just weird. And I think this whole season, if you go back to our preview show, I said, I think he's going to ride around, play it safe. And when it's there, he'll take it. And when it's not, he won't. And the second moto, when he got up there and he clearly, whatever the beef is between him and Adam, it's true. I mean, remember what he did to him at Paula last year, and he saw him and I was like, oh, he's going for it. All of a sudden he decided to jump out of that 90% safety zone and go like he can. And he smashed him. Is it the bike? No, but I also, and there was a lot of controversy about factory parts that Hopper brought up, which is a very valid point because it's happened many times in history where a team has shifted their primary focus to one rider or one rider who's not leaving the team and giving them a little bit better parts. Very valid argument. I don't think that's happening. And I don't think the guys at Kawasaki would pull specific parts, but I can promise you if Tomac didn't like the bike after Colorado, they weren't going to do extra testing with it. And that'd be the difference.
Again, you bring up about 25 good subjects. I think pardon me.
We could have just a Tomac only podcast. That's how great he is. When he's gone, we're going to miss him a lot. I hope he never retires. This is amazing.
Well, in what everybody wanted to see, we saw, whether it's because he flipped a switch and decided he wanted to race, whether it's because he saw AC up there. He definitely gelled with the track. I didn't feel like he rode Thunder Valley it was almost like he'd never been to that track before, and he would look like he was riding somebody else's bike. You know what I mean? It just compare the two from Thunder Valley to here, where at Thunder Valley I still go back to, AC goes down and Tomac catches him, and then AC went past him like Tomac was tied to a pole. It's like, that's just not Tomac. Is that underpowered Cowie? Is that he doesn't give two shits? I don't know. We're not in his head. We're not on his throttle hand. I don't know. We can't see the motor telemetry. All I know is that AC went down in that little right-hander when he pushed the front end. Tomac went around him, and then AC went past him instantly. Well, that raises a big flag. To Hopper's point, it looks like maybe Tomac's bike isn't as fast. I have to agree if you look at just because Tomac does not like to get passed, much less by somebody in the same rig. And AC went right past him. So I do think that when Hopper makes that comment, you do have to ask the question, what would cause such a big difference? Now, again, if we could look at the telemetry and Tomac's at 3/4 of a throttle and AC's wide ass open, okay, then you've answered my question. How did AC go by him? You now look at this past weekend. He's turning the bike like Villopoto did with that rear end. He's sending it off of everything. They that one where it was on the 250s, they would wheel tap it and they would drop down.
Yeah.
And he just sent the whole thing. That's the Tomac that we know that is in, it's a cliche, but he's in full send mode everywhere. He's coming into the corners, Mach 1, just railing the corners everywhere, not afraid of anybody or anything. Was there anybody surprised? Not one person watching it. Everybody was on the edge of the seat going, this is just, we're getting a show here. And then to the point that he's so far out front that they start focusing on the next 4 guys because he's checked out. But he's in another zip code.
Just an hour and a half before that great ride, Aaron Plessinger rode around him like he was a lapper in that first moto.
And that's where I call it. He went over and flipped a switch, whether it was AC being out front or whatever that it is. And it goes back to what you declared at the beginning of the year. You're going to see races of brilliance when he wants to. And we just don't know when he's going to want to. We don't know if he got lucky with his wife. We don't know if he had some good lunch. We don't know what it was because all of a sudden the Tomac of old comes out and not one person watching is surprised. We all love it. We all appreciate it. But I'm going to be a little bit of a jerk here, but let's just be honest. He's still getting the same paycheck, whether he gets 10th or he gets first. We already know he's going to Yamaha, whether he gets 10th or he gets first. Tomac's going to do whatever the heck he wants to do, when he wants to do it, on his terms. Nobody can, what are they going to do, bench him? It's not like, well, I guess.
I thought they were going to bench him. That's,
well,
they've got Brock Tickle. They just pay you. They pay you and say, you know what, you're good. You go home, or you're still going to get your paycheck, but we're going to bring Brock Tickle in for the rest of the year.
But is Tomac going to let that happen?
If they pay him, I think they can.
I don't think they can. Because if you look at Bobby Hewitt sending Anderson home, Bobby Hewitt owned the team. Bobby Hewitt he signed the checks. That's a little bit different when you're talking that team at that time. But when you look at Tomac, Tomac's going to do whatever Tomac wants to do. And you're right, Chris. I don't know. We haven't looked at the contracts. It may not even be in a contract. If a team tries to bench a rider, does the rider have the ability to supersede that decision? I don't know that it's in the contract. We could hit up some of our agent friends that might be able to answer it. But to your point, it's not, I wouldn't have been surprised to see Tickle come out either. I've texted him a couple of times. He's loving his job. He's, he says it's the most fun he's ever had on a motorcycle, which I'm so pumped for him and his gig there. But what does Tomac have to lose? Nothing. I'm sure he's over the travel. He still has to get to all the races. But when he goes there, if he doesn't win, now nobody's bothering him. Nobody cares. Like, oh, he's just doing what Tomac does, on again, off again, off again, on again. So the whole weight of the world's off his shoulders. If you listen back to Villopoto on Whiskey Throttle, what did he say when he was talking about it when they had Bradshaw in there? When you feel like the entire team's success and every one of those mechanics and technicians and truck driver, you having a bad race, you're carrying the weight of everybody in that rig. You're letting all of those 20, 25 people down. Forget what's going on at corporate. Just the guys that make the men and women that make it happen in a rig on the weekend. And Villopoto talked about how he sometimes wished that he had left to go to a different color, but didn't want to because he didn't want to disappoint that small network of people in the rig. And he said his career would have been longer and he would have enjoyed it more had he changed colors. My point is, listen to what Villopoto said, ironic, same team color, and then look at what's going on with Tomac. Ironic, same team color. Is maybe the weight of the world off? And he's like, you know what? Today I feel good. I think I'll rip everyone's head off. Or at least second moto wise.
Well, and that's what I was going to say. I don't think he feels like Tomac right now. Right. I feel like Adam, or he feels like Villopoto. I think Adam feels more like that right now, carrying that team, and everybody cares more about Adam. Tomac has always been slightly detached. He has his own circle. He comes over, jumps on the bike, rides, gets off the bike, detunes and leaves and then comes back. He's never been like Villopoto where he was part of that. I don't think he's ever carried that weight like Villopoto described. truthfully, I mean, I don't know if it's positive or negative, but I don't think he cares. I think he's worried about his job and what he's doing. And he's not, I mean, whatever happens with those guys happens with those guys. And maybe that's a good thing. Maybe it's a bad thing. I don't know.
He being Tomac?
Yeah, I don't think he cares. I think he worries about what he's doing, and that's it.
100% guarantee. 100% agree.
Now, Adam holds the weight of that whole team, and I'm sure he feels bad for that whole team. And it's just a difference in personality, and it can be a godsend for a racer not to carry the extra weight.
Well, but remember when AC was not having the most stellar 250 career, and he was very vocal, he was very transparent, he was very vulnerable when he said, "Look, I didn't even know if I thought my career was over." As everybody called him, baby Jesus. He had everything. He was the prodigy, blah, 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 blah. And